Okay, we're gonna find our seats because we're gonna begin this amazing intimate conversation. Okay, so welcome everybody. We're really excited for this evening. Yisrael Klitsner has a fan club wherever he goes, but really special for Sinai Temple as we have our Sinai Temple Israel Center Rabbinical School Fellowship. We're now in our 4th year, and I'm excited to say, because people watch this online, that we have representatives from each year from 2 or 3 different schools right here, and we're really, really, really proud of that through our Flesh Family Sinai Temple Israel Center, and good work. So we're here this evening the topic is ethics of war, but I think it'll also go into on-the-ground geopolitics, and Israel is always on our mind here at Sinai Temple. We just had dinner at my house with my family, and you were sort of telling us what it looks like on the ground with your own family with 4 sort of different age children. We were at Loyola Marymount this afternoon teaching our Zionist Ideas class, and sort of your face when you looked around the college campus and sort of said it all, like, wow, these kids are having a good time and the time of their life. And we had those really important conversations with them and thinking about what 18 to 21-year-olds look like in your neighborhood and what they're going through as well. So a quick bio for Yisrael, for those who don't know him yet. A fellow at the Jewish People Policy Institute, a Jerusalem-based think tank, previously held the role of Diaspora Affairs advisor to then Prime Minister of Israel, Naftali Bennett. In that position, engaged in diplomatic missions, crafted policy recommendations, authored impactful speeches, played a central role in formulating the Prime Minister's Diaspora Affairs strategy. In his 6 years contributing to AIEF, he serves as Director of Strategic Engagement. I know this without reading this now, but really, when congressmen and women were visiting Israel, it was really Israel who was taking them around and showing them the geopolitical pieces that are important in forming policy both here in America and in Israel. Raised in Jerusalem, his commitment to the service is deeply rooted. IDF from 06 to 09, served in Duvdevan Special Forces Unit. And on October 7th, he was actually in Pittsburgh, but went home and served in the IDF. And actually 2 days after he got out, we sent our first-year fellows back to Israel, and Israel gave them that personal experience, which you can't get from a book. And so we're really excited that Israel's here, traveling around the country, doing really important work. And we're all glad that everybody is here with us, joining as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So like, how do you start? Yisrael is often a person that I go to, as I said this morning, where I don't ask him for answers, but rather I ask him what questions we should be asking. So maybe we'll start there. And what questions should we be asking as Jews in America about what we see? I guess we'll start in Israel. We'll do all the I's. We'll start in Israel, and then we'll go to Iran.
Okay. Some of the important questions to be asking right now, I think, first of all, good to be here. I feel like I'm at home, seeing many familiar faces and those that I don't know. It's nice to see you. One of the important questions right now inside of Israel is what is going to happen in the lead up to Israeli elections. An election year in ordinary times is something that it tends to get highly contested. It divides the Israeli people even more than they are already divided. And as many of you know who are following anything about the news in Israel, polarization is a real thing, and it did not bypass the Israeli people.
Glad we can share something in common.
Yeah. So, and now to top that off, that we are in an election year, it is also an ongoing rolling struggle with various continuous wars. So it's what started off with the October 7th attack, then morphed into a regional war, then turned into a larger regional war. And it seems like there are never-ending issues that Israel has to tackle. But really, what it's all going to boil back to when we are looking at the end of this year, this coming year, is going to be what are these elections going to shape up to be? And my fear is that when people look externally into Israel and what Israel is spreading in terms of its messages, they'll see some of the more difficult sides of a country that is deeply traumatized, a country and a people that are trying to find their way after an incredibly difficult few years. And the questions that they're going to be asking themselves, that I ask myself and that other Israelis are going to be struggling with, is how do we pick leadership that is going to do many things for us? I'll break down that statement. It would be much easier to ask the question, how do we choose better leadership, if there wasn't this looming incredible threat over the state of Israel at all times. Right? Then Israelis can actually ask themselves the real questions that they need to ask about leadership. Is this leader going to provide us with better socioeconomic outcomes? Is this leader going to give us the public safety that we are looking for, not externally, but internally? Is that person going to provide us with a better outlook for income inequality, a better status quo with regards to religion in the state? All these issues that Israelis desperately need to get to tackling that simply aren't getting to because they're asking themselves one question and one question only, definitely since October 7th, but even before then, and that is, how am I going to wake up tomorrow morning without having a missile hitting my home? And given that that is the question, the public debate around who is going to be elected, I expect it to be that much more heated, that much more contested, the divisions even deeper than they were before. And again, I think that the questions we should be asking about this, at least to ourselves, is how do we find ways to relate to that discourse, as ugly as it may get? So laying out the fear of what is to come in a difficult election cycle and trying to provide a little bit of insight into how to approach that from the outside looking in. Right? For Israelis, they're going to be in it. I'm going to be in it, and it's going to be sweeping. But for, I think, especially you here in the diaspora, but also elsewhere around the world, I expect there to be some unsightly sights and some difficult statements and other people who are going to be running that could be on the fringe of Israeli society, and they're going to probably make their way in a more significant way this time around.
So another thing that we're looking from the outside in is not just Israeli politics. I don't have an Israeli passport. I didn't serve in the IDF. I can't vote. I remember actually about 6 years ago when we were at AIPAC, you went home early because you have to be in person, and all the Israelis left AIPAC to literally vote in the elections on that Tuesday. You didn't miss much on that Tuesday, just a lobbying session. But another thing that we're looking outside in is also Iran, right? So missiles are not hitting my house. They're not falling, no sirens going off here. But as we've talked about all day long in different audiences, it seems like there's two different goals, US, Israel, but with the same place of Iran. How does that fit into the internal, external picture of what we're looking at externally from Los Angeles?
Yeah, I'm following very closely the conversation specifically with regards to how many are construing the Israeli war against Iran as the opening salvo only to get the US involved and not the other way around, or not in collaboration, not in cooperation. I think that is a misread of what truly transpired and what is in fact the case, and that is there was really close collaboration and security ties between the United States and Israel. I've seen it firsthand from inside the Prime Minister's office, but also elsewhere. And it is long-standing and one of the most incredibly held asset that is upkept at every moment. So I don't question that collaboration. I think that they probably reached their individual conclusions as they needed to, meaning the Israelis on their part and the Americans on theirs. There are many interests that align between Israel and the United States, and there are some interests that diverge. When we were at the college campus earlier today at Toyota, one of the students asked me about this very issue of whether or not it's in the U.S.'s best interest. And I said, I can speak primarily from the vantage point of an Israeli with an Israeli mindset. And through that mindset, I can say 1,000% I support this move. I think it's incredible for the state of Israel because this is a massive threat that has been held over the Israelis' heads. The question of whether or not Iran was going to act upon the threat of maybe holding a nuclear weapon, I think it became a moot point at from a certain point onwards, because not taking terrorists at their word has become something we can no longer afford to do, Israelis can no longer afford to do after October 7th. I would claim even much before that, but certainly that is the case after October 7th. When somebody says they have a plan to annihilate you, they're probably looking for ways to act upon that. So going back to Israel's vantage point, when Iran built up this entire network of proxies, Naftali Bennett, prime minister that I worked for, used to call this, whenever we would meet with foreign delegations, he would start off by calling this the octopus imagery, the octopus with many tentacles. They've built up these proxies so that they can deter Israel, but also so that they can wreak havoc throughout the region without anybody ever retaliating against them directly, but needing to constantly fend off these tentacles. And what Naftali Bennett would say time and again is, we need to flip the script. We need to be able to go after the Iranian regime because that is the brainstem. That's where everything is coming from. And without dealing with the source of the problem, we're not going to be able to get into a better place here. And that's way back then, meaning not way back, a little bit before October 7th. After October 7th, the Israeli people and the Israeli government were in unison, left and right. There's consensus on this matter, which is to say, Israel can no longer live with these incredible threats right on their doorstep. We're not going to accept the fact that Hamas is a significant power in the way that it was on the eve of October 7th. We're not going to accept the fact that Hezbollah can have and amass a stockpile of 150,000 rockets and missiles that can hit with exact precision anywhere in Israel. We're not going to accept the fact that the Houthis can harm and damage the Israeli potential for economic trade through the Suez Canal and other places in the Middle East. We're not going to accept the fact that the Palestinian Islamic Jihad and other terror groups are creating a chaotic situation inside the West Bank, et cetera, et cetera. Those are the tentacles, those are the threats, and what Prime Minister Naftali Bennett spoke about at the time turned into a real policy of the Israeli government through Bibi Netanyahu, which is to say, we're going after Iran. We're no longer waiting. We need to create a new equation because we believe them and because we have no other choice. We just simply, at this point, have no other choice. So that's the Israeli side. The American side, I think, is more complicated. There is a larger geostrategic picture that includes Russian interests, that includes, meaning the American interests vis-a-vis Russia, that includes China, of course, but it also includes the US administration figuring out what type of posture they would like to take on in the world and the foreign policy that they are taking on. Now, I get it. There are many questions being asked and raised about the validity and the lawfulness of the decision through which, the process through which President Trump has acted. And katonti, they say in Hebrew, right? Who am I to say anything about that? Because I am an Israeli speaking about an American issue. But like I said, what I can say is that strictly from an Israeli lens, this action, it's all about time. And how much time can we set back so many of our foes so that they're no longer posing any type of credible threat?
So you said this morning in a different session that you said about 98% are okay with, the war in Iran, basically. But then you also said during October 7th that when you spoke to your comrades within the IDF, wherever they were coming from politically, ideologically, it actually didn't change. It actually made them think even more deeply in that sort of, let's say, algorithm. Maybe just unpack that, what that actually meant, because when you get into the IDF, as also heard you say, and we know, it's a place where Israel actually comes together in so many different ways, secular, Orthodox, doesn't matter where you're from, all of a sudden you're together in a way that this country does not do. So maybe just unpack that when, even though people are with, what's happening in Iran, in Israel, it seems that they've sort of also gone to their corners, if you wish.
Yeah, I mean, that's been this strange division. If I were to go back to the political realm for just 1 second, Bibi, for many, many years, this has been his banner. The banner has been, there's nobody else that can protect Israelis from the big bad wolf in Iran. Only I can do that. I can stand up to whoever I need to stand up on the world stage. That's on the diplomatic side. I can make the difficult decisions that I need to make in real time. I can steward this ship. But I think that if I were to pass a critique onto Bibi as well at the same time, it is that I believe that in his mind, he's telling himself that internal divisions inside of Israel are not as important as this topic. And in order for me to stay in power, if that means that I'm going to take actions that are potentially hazardous to those internal divisions, so be it. That'll keep me in power just long enough to keep Israel safe and not under threat the way that it is. So that's a little bit about that sort of equation between what is the Iranian threat and what looks like an internal Israeli political divide. Yeah, you're right. There is a wide consensus in Israel with regards to the war in Iran. And at the same time, they're at each other's throats, literally. I'll remind everybody here that Israel went to 5 consecutive elections in the span of 2.5 years. And that was because we couldn't really figure out who and how we'd like the country run. So those question marks still are live and kicking. They are right there. They were only suppressed for a little bit longer because we had to deal with some of these other issues. But they are still underlying the issue of judicial reform and whether or not the balance between the judiciary and the executive branch in Israel is the right one are very much alive. The issue of religion and state with regards to the ultra-Orthodox community and the exemption from military service, that is way more than alive. There are so many issues that are gnawing and biting at the Israeli society internally and ripping them apart in the worst of ways, that it's almost like putting on a Band-Aid for the time being, only to get to the point where you can rip it right off and go back into dealing with that wound. Now, my hope is that I think it's actually important that we go into these issues. Right? It's not a healthy thing that we keep getting sidetracked and sidelined by these external threats that pull us away from what we so desperately have to unravel and deal with in a very real way. I'll give an example of something that took place, when was it? I think it was the early 2000s. There was a pretty well thought out proposal for how to deal with or how to fix Israel's deadlock with regards to religion and state. It was called the Gabizon Meidan contract. And Ruth Gabizon, famous judge in Israel, Rav Meidan is this well-known rabbi in Israel. And together they sat for a very long time and put together this really well thought out 100-page document. And it fizzled. And there are other reasons for why it fizzled, but I suspect that one of them has to do with the fact that Israel is constantly on the defensive when it comes to these external threats.
And so when we titled this The Ethics of War, you've also been in wars. Some of you here were in Israel with Yisrael, literally days after you got out of Gaza. When we talk about wars, now internally Israel-Hamas, but also Israel-Iran, specifically with Iran and Hamas, we often hear distinction between regime and the Iranian people and Hamas and the Gazans. How do you define that as a IDF veteran that has seen things that we don't see?
Yeah, I never liked the artificial separation between Gaza civilians and Hamas members, because it really isn't that simple. That's one of the things, by the way, that Israelis have woken up to after October 7th, is not only to say we can't kick the can down the road with dealing with these major terror groups and have to go after Iran and others that are posing a threat, but it's also to say we need to get to the root cause of the problem. And we need to tackle things like the education system in Palestinian territories, which are teaching true vitriol and hate. And how do we do that? How do we begin to make this a better situation down the line into the future? So let's set that aside for a second. Given that the education system is really teaching that much hate towards Jews and towards Israelis, I think that Hamas has, for sure, Hamas has utilized civilians inside Gaza to fortify their positions and to ensure their own safety, and using that as part of their tactics. All this is known and true. But in addition to that, I would say it's really difficult to make that differentiation between the two, because ultimately, there are many, many stories about hostages that were taken and how they were treated by the civilians that were holding them in their homes. But in addition to that, I also know that oftentimes Hamas had to protect these civilian captives from other Gazans so that they don't kill them, because they need them as their chits with the Israelis. So we know this. When I was in, so I was in Gaza twice. The first time in 2008, and the second time just recently after October 7th. And in both times, it's very abundantly clear that making that artificial separation between the population is an incredibly difficult thing to do. Now, I want to give the caveat of, I also have no doubt at the same time that there are many civilians in Gaza that want nothing to do with Hamas and that are truly victims of this problem. So there is that as well. But to say constantly, and this is what we keep hearing in foreign media and elsewhere, that the civilian population on one side and Hamas on another, I would just claim it really isn't that simple.
It sounds different than Iran, where we were talking to this student today,
right,
who was in Iran during the 12-day war as Persian American, and seemed like, but even she said, sometimes I get confused by who's on the street, right?
Exactly. Well, she did mention, and this is true, the Basij in Iran, the enforcers of Sharia law and the other IRGC and Ayatollahs will and wish onto the people. They wear civilian clothing, but she was claiming that the civilian population does know who they are anyways. It's just we can't tell necessarily.
That's not good.
But the IRGC forces, they are wearing tactical gear.
And so when just the October 7th piece, from the outside world, when Israel was convicted of war crimes and the G word and all those things, just internally, and we've had many conversations,
Yeah.
and it might be a vulnerable space, but how does that feel when I know you as a human being and many of us know you and you explain a lot of what you both had to do and also need to do to protect your own children? What is that feel?
It doesn't feel good. It is hurtful. It really, really hurtful because when you call, well, first of all, on an intellectual level, I think it doesn't make any sense to do that. Forget the fact that it's simply not true, and we could go into the why, and I just don't think this is the place for that. Forget that for a second. What is your purpose in labeling Israel a genocidal state? I would claim that the only purpose there is to that type of label is to make it muktzeh, to make Israel a pariah state. First of all, Israel is not going anywhere, and that's a fact as well. And therefore, whoever is labeling these labels, it is a practice in futility in many ways, and I think it only probably harms even their cause as well. In many instances, I believe that the people who are, even the innocent ones, who are labeling Israel genocidal, meaning it's not coming from a place of trying to destroy Israel's credibility only for the sake of destroying Israel's credibility because they don't believe in Zionism, even they, I think, are serving as an Aaron's fool a little bit. There was another part to your question, though.
Just the vulnerability of
you're
not
right.
just
So that's on the intellectual level. For me personally, I know this military. I know it well. It's comprised of Israeli society in all its beauty, glory, and ugliness. All of it's there. And I think that's both the beauty and the pain of it, because when you have, this is what we spoke about earlier, the melting pot of Israeli society that is not only the soldiers on the ground, but that is the rank and file, the leadership of the organization as well. You know full well that these policies are coming from people like you and I. I know, I have many friends who are in high command positions. The thought of them saying, we are now going to kill as many Gazans as possible because we just want to commit genocide, it's preposterous beyond belief. And that's why, very hurtful.
So my last question before we open up in conversation, I'd like to end on optimism. And over dinner, you were explaining, am I allowed to tell them what you've been doing the last couple of weeks? Okay. On one of our last Zoom calls, Yisrael was, when you say the good, the bad, and the ugly, you mean ugly, the accommodations they gave you in the IDF, right? Because that room you were in was really, wow.
That too.
But you're recruiting the next group of really combat officers in the highest level elite units. What do you see in this next generation who these kids, and I say kids, they weren't even in the IDF on 10-7, they were 15 and 16. What do you see that gives us hope here?
I see an incredible group. I'll give, before I talk about these recruits, I'll talk about my good friend who's my high school teacher. He told me when we met for coffee about a year ago, he said, you know, Yisrael, all high school students right now that I'm teaching in the same school that I was in, none of them are talking about going to a gap year. to do a leadership program, to do anything in between. They all want to go straight into the military, and they all want to go into the least sexy positions, to things like tanks and artillery and other things, that where positions where they know there's a great need, and they know that the IDF is desperately trying to revamp its apparatus there. So that was quite the thing to hear by way of optimism. When I see these kids and trying out and coming in with this, you say in Hebrew, barak ba'inayim, with thunder in their eyes. Thank you. It fills me with pride, because these are kids who know that this is their country. They're taking pride in it. They're taking ownership over it. If you look for a second at the landscape, the NGO landscape right now in Israel, it's not to be believed. Every other day, there's another organization that pops up that has to do with rebuilding Israeli leadership and taking care of the younger generation, so that it is going to do the healing that Israel so desperately needs. So incredible things happening on the ground in Israel. The younger generation is not giving up. That is, to say the least. They are in this to win it, and they are going to fight tooth and nail to take full ownership of the country that they love so much. And that says a lot, that at the ripe age of 17 or 15 or 14, these kids are ready to say, this is our country. We are proud of it, and we want to do everything in our power to make sure that it is the best it can be, best version of itself.
And then JPPI, Jewish People Policy Institute, a think tank. What are you thinking about?
There are a bunch of issues. What I would say one of the main ones that the Institute is tackling right now is something called a Thin Constitution. It's a project that Justice Eliakim Rubinstein, who is a Supreme Court justice, as well as the president of the Institute, together they put together this plan to have a thin constitution, so not a full constitution. A full constitution in Israel is something that we actually really need. But as I mentioned before, because there's this rupture in Israeli society, we're probably not going to get to see eye to eye on many of the topics that need to put together and comprise this constitution. Therefore, the best possible thing to do right now is to have this different version, which at the very least sets the rules of the game so that they are on an even playing field. That, unfortunately, right now does not exist in Israel. And that's one of the large projects that the Institute is tackling right now.
So let's open it up to questions for Yisrael. Yeah, Fred, please.
Thank you. First, welcome. We're honored to have you in our presence. A question and a quick comment. The question is, what is your crystal ball about the Haredi draft status? It just seems to me that's a terrible issue facing society. And the short comment I want to give you is, you had mentioned earlier that you thought that arguing for the U.S. to be adverse and attacking Iran is a tougher one to follow, to argue, than Israel versus Iran. And I would just say, from an American perspective, I think there's a very strong case that can be made that Iran has been attacking the United States since its inception in 1979, hostages for 444 days, and blowing up the barracks in Beirut with 240-something Americans, arming with IUDs, in Afghanistan and Iraq, and maiming and killing thousands of American soldiers, and arming Russians, most recently with drones, to be attacked in Ukraine. I mean, if there's not a country that's against the U.S. interest and chants death to America.
Let me add one to your list: destabilizing South America with illicit activities all over the place. Yeah, I agree.
I don't think it's a tough case to argue.
Well, I think my point was more so that it's a different set of interests, meaning there are other pieces to the equation that don't necessarily fit perfectly with the Israeli one. I think the Israeli one is a very open shut case. It's so simple. And it's been simple for a very long time. the U.S., when it enters into a large-scale war with a country that is far away, I think they're just, especially given the historical context, it's a bit more complicated, I think. Israel's is so clear. So that was my point that I hope you take it with a grain of salt if you'd like. But to your point, to your question about the ultra-Orthodox community and the draft bill, yes, this is my sense from the very get-go was that since October 7th, this issue no longer became one that can remain on the sidelines, and that if anything is going to topple Netanyahu's government, it's going to be this. So long as he locks arms with the ultra-Orthodox community parties, this is going to be held over his head. Now, will the Israeli people, the Israeli voter, hold him accountable for that come election day? I think that is to be determined. We're about to find out, but that's going to depend on, I think, Netanyahu's ability, and he's a master orator, so I have some trust in what he's going to be able to do. He is going to tell the narrative of, like I said, I'm the one who can protect you against Iran. And that's the narrative. Yes, we have an issue with the ultra-Orthodox community, but we can weather that storm. This storm cannot be weathered. So that's his story. Going back to where things are, just to shed a little more light on this problem, hopefully, I'm sure many of you know about this, but I'll say a few words. I think before October 7th, the exemption for the ultra-Orthodox community, and by the way, also for the Arab community, was seen as something that you can live with. It is what it is. Like it pains people. It stings for sure. That why do I have to send my son to the army and potentially go to his death when they have no such worry in their lives? Not to mention many other economic issues that exist in the lack of equality between the treatment that the ultra-Orthodox community receives as opposed to everybody else. And then on top of that, when October 7th happened, I think the Israeli population said it's similar to the proxies and to Iran, no longer. Right? Like you can't have it both ways. You're either a citizen or you are not. You are either contributing or you're not. If you want to be a citizen, if you want to contribute, if you want to be part, if you want to receive from the state, which you are receiving a lot, you have to give us something. There's been a lot of conversation and a lot of different drafts of plans on how to integrate them, and there's a lot of fear from the ultra-Orthodox community on integration, whether or not that is something that is sustainable, and can it be properly done in a way that really satisfies the needs of the ultra-Orthodox community with regards to women, with regards to their need for Torah study, with regards to many other issues. And all, I think, are valid. There were many attempts to meet those demands that I don't think they fell short of what would constitute a good proposition. It exists. The plans are there. That's not the problem. The problem is political willpower. The leadership of the ultra-Orthodox community simply doesn't want to go in this direction. And why should they? They have this built-in incentive that leads them to only want more of what they had. So it's up to the Israeli people. That's the bottom line. But my fear is that this problem will not be solved in the way that the Israeli people really want it to be solved. I'll give another example. Religion in the state, one of the largest consensus that Israelis do have is on breaking apart the monopoly that the rabbinate has. They don't want that. Israelis don't like the rabbinate. Yeah, I know, this is very controversial what I'm saying. But that doesn't happen. So why doesn't it happen? Because every single time you get to a fork in the road where that potentially could come to the forefront, you have some second intifada happening, or you have an October 7th happening, or you have a million other major security events that take place. And these flare-ups, they divert the conversation that so desperately needs to happen. The Israeli voter that's going to go come October, and maybe even before then, to the ballot, like in a perfect world, they would go, and they would. This is what they would want to go to the ballot box with, to say which party, which leader of which party is running on a platform that is providing a great solution for this particular problem, because it is not bearable. And we're not willing to live like this anymore. That's a perfect world. We are far from it. And I hope, I still think it will play pretty prominently in these coming elections, and that it might even make a difference, meaning my prediction, this is a little bit deeper in the weeds of the baseball of Israeli politics, but Lieberman, the leader of the Russian party, who for a long time has been very anti-rabbinate and anti-ultra-Orthodox parties, I suspect that he's going to receive a sizable portion of votes due to the fact that this is still very much on the agenda of many Israelis.
Speaking about baseball, what about the Israel and the World Baseball Classic? I'm just kidding. That was a good one too. Anybody else? Yeah, Howard?
I want to ask you a question about the ethics of politics.
There are
You have on lack of ethics, but you talk about this younger generation of high school students who really want to give to the state of Israel in one way or another. Do you think that there's a way or an incentive or a desire to really try to heal the ethics of politics in Israel, which in my opinion, is very self-destructive.
Yeah.
Not only is it self-destructive, I think it makes Israel vulnerable to foreign powers who are against Israel. So what is the attitude of younger people trying to say, enough, we have enough of this garbage between these fighting?
Yeah.
And what is the possibility of taking that, if there is a germ, if there is a root, to let that grow and try to heal the country?
Thank you for that question. Very thoughtful. My first thought after, not immediately after October 7th, but one of the first things that I thought politically after October 7th was, boy, anybody remember the thing you had to do to reboot your computer called Control-Alt-Delete? Do that for the Israeli political system. Just reboot the whole thing. Start anew. Find new people, new blood. It doesn't even have to be new ideas. Just nobody who had anything to do with October 7th on the policy level. Nobody who's been tainted by the rifts that are so ugly and unbearable inside the Israeli political sphere. And rebuild, restructure from scratch. That is not going to happen. I lament the fact that it's not going to happen. I wish that it would, but I don't believe that is going to be the case. There is something to be said about political experience, especially given the tumultuous times that we live in. There is a wisdom there, so I'm not minimizing that, meaning to bring a novice politician, or many of them, to lead a country that needs stability at this pretty critical juncture, that's a very difficult thing to do. So I'll set that as the caveat. With regards to your question about the cynicism and the lack of ethics inside the Israeli political arena, look, it is awful. I don't believe that we are unique in how awful our politics are. Unfortunately, this is a plague that hits almost every democracy in the world, if not every. And I don't profess to know how to fix it. I don't know. I was in it and quite revolted by it and sort of pushed. I really, there was a lot there that I wish I didn't see. But I also understand that it is a rough and tumble world that we live in. And unfortunately, this is maybe a truth of life that one requires, meaning it's not a fatalistic approach of just go with the darkness because that's the only way. It's to say, I think there's a level of cynicism that one needs to approach any political system with, to say, and to understand that the way decisions are made are far from what's the word I'm looking for sterile. They're far from a sterile environment. It's a really messy one. It's a messy environment, and it probably needs to be a messy environment. Take, for example, the ultra-Orthodox draft bill, right? Like, there are so many considerations by so many parties and so many players. If it was only thinking about what is the bottom line, what is going to be the best for the most amount of people, I wish that were the case. But that's not the way these things tend to happen. Having said all that, I go back to my earlier thought that I mentioned, which is, boy, do I wish we had a reboot. I really think we need it. Yeah.
Spark, it's not a movement. It needs more of an awareness. Not that you guys are not already aware of the problem, but to say, hey, we have a future too. Are you guys going to promote it and destroy it? We want to know. And look at all the mass people immigrating out of Israel.
Yeah.
We have cousins that want to go to Portugal.
Yeah. There's an entire community living in Thailand and in other places in Germany and other. I mean, if you travel the world right now, you might bump into by accident a small community of Israelis. It's a real thing. There's a negative immigration that's taking place. 100%. I agree with you. But I think it's important to note that while I do want all these things to happen, I share your sentiment 1,000%. I think one needs to approach this with a level of realism that understands and is shrewd about how the system works and how to make it function in the best possible way. Because again, I think we're at a juncture where we can't really afford ourselves any real missteps and any novice mistakes. There is, I mentioned before with regards to Rabbi Sherman's question about my optimism and where it is derived from. When I spoke about the NGOs, I can't even count how many NGOs are tackling this very issue, which is to say they're building real leadership. And they're saying, we need this younger generation to be all it can be. How do we get to the point where they aren't the inexperienced potential politicians, and they actually are the people who are ready to take the helm in a real way? That's being built right now, and I think there's a lot happening on that level, which again, to me says that's wonderful news. That's really, really good news. The bad news is it takes time. It really does. Like, I think the wake-up call was there, very much so, but now it takes a little bit of time. I think it's a little too soon to say, just wipe out the political system and bring in everybody new. Like, that's not going to happen. But to build up that muscle, it really takes time, effort, resources, and everything in between. And that's happening right now. Yeah.
Let's do like 2 rounds.
Thank you so much, and it's good to see you.
You too, Samson.
Yeah, so I have like 3 questions. One of one of them being we seem to have a big problem, which is the ultra-Orthodox. Like many. But that problem, first of all, how much influence do they have that Bibi cannot serve a ties with ultra-Orthodox over the other many Israelis? Because I'm wondering if there is no other party that he can support Bibi in case he wants the support to go back to do his work. Secondly,
Wait, I'm not sure I fully understood your first question. So you're asking.
so how powerful are they that Bibi is failing to serve a ties with them, rather he has to fulfill whatever they want to do?
Okay, yeah. Second question?
And so the second question, I think is part of that, is the support of ultra-Orthodox by Bibi. Like whenever I go to several synagogues, I have had people asking if this proposal, the bill that is in the House, seem to undermine the diaspora and people who are not like ultra-Orthodox. And so what's the consideration? Is it the Bibi is Israelis as well looking at that? Because much as it's not the top number one, but the support and the relationship from diaspora comes from the consideration. First of all, we call that home, but also even in your home when you feel like you are being left out, I think we have a bigger problem.
Right, I agree. The questions are definitely related. I'll answer really quick and make it
I want
punchy.
to say congratulations, right? Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Became a new dad
Congratulations.
again. Yes.
The questions are indeed related. Regarding to the first part of your question, the answer is, I think, potentially Naftali Bennett could be together with Bibi. There are a few other newcomers into the political system. We don't know yet who they are and how successful they're going to be, but there is talk about somebody whose name is Moshe Kachlon, who was pretty popular in finance minister. Maybe him. There are a few others that could potentially sideline the ultra-Orthodox parties. The reason I don't see that happening is because of the answer to the second part of your question, which is the ultra-Orthodox parties, historically and still now, have set aside, we just spoke about this earlier as well, they set aside the number one topic in Israel and the number one issue that all Israelis care about and the prime minister cares about and everybody else, which is security. They say, you guys are the experts, Bibi, you do what you gotta do, we trust you, it's fine. Or even if it's not Bibi, right? If they're going to be in a coalition with the left, which they have been in the past, I'll remind everybody, they okayed Oslo, the ultra-Orthodox parties. It's because they go with it. They go with whatever coalition they're part of. And the reason they go with whatever coalition they're part of is because they say, as long as we get what's due to us, everything else doesn't matter. Meaning it matters, but we're good. Well, we need to take care of our own. So that's their modus operandi, and that's how they get to where they get to. That's how they receive an outsized political capital to the actual true numbers of their political parties. That's also why they are highly coveted by these prime ministers to be it on the left or on the right, because they know, these prime ministers to be, that not only do the ultra-Orthodox parties not have ambition to become prime minister material themselves, so they're not competing for that position, but they're also going to give them everything they want on the main thing that they need, and that is anything related to security. Yeah.
Tori, Deborah.
Hi.
Hey.
So I wish I could remember who was it that said this, but it was in one of the fellowships. and some brilliant thinker in Israel said that one of the challenges that Israel faces is that it wants to be loved by the West, but needs to be feared by the Middle East. And I am curious of the on the ground perception of Israelis of what is that balance right now in terms of the war that's happening the war with Iran that's happening right now.
I think I don't think it's on the minds of Israelis to be honest with you, to care about anybody else. I think that this is the first time I can remember where Israelis are just done giving a shit. Sorry, we're in a shul. But they're not making those calculated strategic outlooks. They're saying, no, we're going to do what we need to do, and that's that. So yes, I still think that Israelis very much want to be loved by the West, and I also can certainly say that even after October, especially after October 7th, that they want to be feared by the Middle East. Both are true. But yeah, but now it's all the more so true that nobody really cares. Yep.
I hope I'm not unpopular in some of my questions here, but one of the concerns that I have is that Israel is now focusing on Iran. At least the media here isn't covering what's happening in Gaza anymore. Mm-hmm. So I don't really know what's happening in Gaza, except, one article I read said that Hamas is building back up a little bit. And I'm just concerned about sometimes the U.S. and Israel have a very strong military approach to solving problems right now. And I'm just worried about the practicality of taking on people on so many fronts. It's not that I think these people are good. Yeah. I think they're not good people, and they are working antithetically to the survival of the state of Israel. But at the same time, I am worried. There's the analogy of whack-a-mole, and I'm just concerned about Israel's ability to, one, from a practical level, and there's a little bit of a part two, on a practical level to handle so many different fronts. There's also a part of me that is an idealist, that I am not really fond of such military measures all the time. Of course, World War II is necessary. We defeated Hitler. The world did change. Germany is different now. But I'm also just worried about the impression that Israel makes on its enemies, that it just perpetuates the negativity towards Israel among her enemies. And can we literally solve our problems solely with military action? And I saw, last little comment, there was a medical doctor at Duke University who put in a program in Gaza where these kids could come and get education and food, which they were sorely needing. And they were also able to change the curriculum of what these students were learning. And it is a fairly sizable program. But that's a method where you're not using the military, but you're using other ways to change things.
So let me start by saying that I share your concern. I agree. I don't think that a military solution is the solution for everything. However, that hasn't really been the approach on the Israeli part, meaning, yes, there have been quite a few military campaigns. I think many of them were either strategic decisions given the situation, or they were reactions to problems that were imminent and needed taking care of. That does not absolve this government from seeking diplomatic efforts as well. I think it's necessary and imperative. It depends on the situation. Look, with regards to Iran, the diplomatic route has been attempted for years. It from the Israeli standpoint, it miserably failed, right? What once was a relatively smaller problem turned into a massive problem. So that's on that front. On the front of Gaza, specifically with regards to your remarks on what's happening there, first of all, what's happening there is that it's not a total standstill, but Israel has basically split the Gaza Strip into half, East Berlin, West Berlin. The hope is that there's some sort of strategic plan for the future, but it doesn't seem like anything is materializing right now. I think that is a case in point of right where that transition happens from diplomacy or from military into diplomacy, and I think there's also a question of right. Almost every military campaign at some point is going to reach the level and layer of diplomacy. The question is when. So in each and every one of these fronts, that question needs to be analyzed in a different way. With regards to Gaza, I think we've already been there in on and off negotiations, not always with Hamas, but with the international community and sometimes with Hamas as well, on how to do something about this that is sustainable. But with regards to some of the other arenas, yeah, Israel is it's not a global superpower. It can't take on the entire world. I would agree with that. I think Israel is pretty sober, at least for now, as to what it can and cannot do, what it can take on and what it can't, which is why this war with Iran, together with the United States, is, from Israel's standpoint, a very good thing, right? Because it allows that depth that Israel could then allow itself to have the maneuverability in other arenas that need attention. Israel knew full well that if and when it attacks on Iranian soil, Hezbollah is going to come into play in full swing. So there's no question about that. But I would split this question into two, because there's one side of this that is really analytically strategic and military. It's a military diplomatic question. But the other layer to your question has to do with public diplomacy and how Israel is perceived externally, and what this means to have what looks like a whack-a-mole strategy on Israel's part. And there, I would say, again, I would go back to the comment that I made just a second ago, which is, I don't think Israel cares as much as it did in the past on what the West thinks about it right now at this moment. There'll be a time for that. Meaning, I think we're going to turn a corner pretty soon, and there will be a need for greater relationship building measures and reframe what trust looks like between some of the countries that have fallen out with Israel. But for the time being, while Israel is still very much in the thick of it, I don't think that's where it's not making the top 5 of what needs to be done. Yeah.
Quick one, Yisrael. Yes, please. Of course, my heart breaks for my friends and family in Israel who are suffering from these missiles daily, especially given the fact that I was there last summer when it was happening the first time. So I have deep appreciation for what they're going through. My question, I'm curious, given the alarming rise in anti-Semitism around the world, but especially here in the United States, even though the incident recently in Michigan, where at least what was espoused to have been related to what's happening in the Middle East and in Israel, I wonder what the perspective of Israelis is regarding the anti-Semitism and anti-Semitic attacks that we see in the United States. What's the thought process? What's the relationship?
Thank you very much for a most informative discussion. My question may be a bit repetitive of what has been discussed, but my introduction is from a Torah point of view, or from the Talmud, Sanhedrin 72a. It says, if somebody rises up to kill you, you must rise up and kill first. And
Hakam lehorgecha, hashkem lehorgo. Yeah.
And in the Yom Kippur War in 1973, the Rebbe, Rebbe Schneerson, his advice to Menachem Begin was you cannot prevail by appeasement, you have to go all out and you have to defend your territory and not to make concessions. And my learned friend here gave us an excellent description of how America has been attacked, and you've gone over many times how it's in Israel's interest to defend itself and so forth. And the title of tonight I understood to be The Ethics of War. So my question is, or one of my questions is, how do you account for so many Jews in Congress who are opposed to America and Israel, not only in this war, but Israel in defending itself, especially against Gaza, going back a couple of years. And not only Jews in Congress, but mainstream Jews who are totally opposed. Is it purely political, just anti-Trump, or is it misinformation or not understanding, or is there some ethical issue here that people are just seeing things differently from what my introduction alluded to?
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
that and last one. Oh, three more. Hello.
It's a good thing I'm writing.
Yes.
Okay, so my question is sort of a what if, a prediction question. If we let ourselves sort of dream about a future where the outcome of the current chapters of the conflicts ends up very positive for Israel. So there's regime change in Iran, it's very peaceful. There's some sort of deal with Lebanon that Hezbollah ends up fully disarmed, and maybe there's a land for peace deal or something, and so relations with Lebanon are suddenly very positive. What happens next? I sort of have two questions about that. One is, or I guess I have two guesses about that, and I sort of wonder if you think that might be true. One is, do the relations with other Gulf states start to deteriorate a little bit because you sort of lost this common enemy? And then another question is, as we've talked about sort of Israel sort of finding itself in this place where it doesn't care so much what the West thinks anymore. And we've also discussed how Israel finds itself in a place where it's very upset with the Palestinian people, right? And so I wonder if we end up in a place where, I'm thinking in particular, like if we put Gaza aside, like the West Bank, right? Does annexation become like actually sort of a popular proposal within the state at that point? Or how do you see that conversation sort of changing shape?
Thank you.
Actually, I had almost the same question as Mo about kind of the Israeli perception awareness of growing anti-Semitism in America from all sides. But as Mo said, since the most recent Iran war, but also before, just curious what you.
Thank you. It's like we should all go with Israel to Israel like we've all done, because we need another week.
Sir. The Band-Aid, pulling the Band-Aid off. Do you think it's possible to do that during a conflict? Do you think it's coming? Is it coming around the corner? Is it going to be an issue in this next election? Can it be used as as an election kind of issue by pulling it off and so forth. Anyway, that image was interesting.
Okay. The next question you can ask in Florida. Yeah. A lot of us are going to be in Miami actually with Yisrael on Sunday. Sorry, Palm Beach. Yes.
Okay, that's all? Yeah, just a few questions. Okay, starting with the top. So to both of your questions with regards to anti-Semitism and how Israel is accounting for Jews and living in the diaspora and whether or not it's on the hearts and minds of Israelis. I would say with regards to is it on the hearts and minds of Israelis, the answer is to a certain degree. It's not fully there, but it's also not there. I think there is a limited capacity right now to hold much from the outside world. Yeah.
I just want to say that it's crazy when, and if you have relatives in Israel, when we get the text saying, "Are you okay?" And that happens more often than not these days, based on Toronto, Amsterdam, Michigan, everywhere. So yeah, it's pretty crazy on our end to hear when they're like, "Are you okay?"
It is, it's true. So again, it's not there. It is there, but look, this whole question of where in the relationship between the state of Israel and the rise and fall of anti-Semitism globally, it's very clear, abundantly clear that the two are intertwined in ways that cannot be separated. And then the question becomes, okay, so who acts how and why? And what can potentially lead to greater measures of safety, to greater measures of ensuring that this is held at bay. And I don't think there's an easy answer here. There are proponents who will claim that there should be a policy in Israel by which government decisions should entail thinking amongst the other considerations also about what that decision will mean for the diaspora, for the sake of diaspora. Right now we're talking about issues relating to safety, but this also relates to the question of religion and state, as we mentioned before, right? So, and how you feel about what's happening there, and how closely you can feel as Jewish individuals living outside of Israel in coming there and feeling at home and feeling like that place is embracing you for who you are. And I already laid out the political landscape with regards to the ultra-Orthodox community and why it is that they have amassed that much power and why the issue never gets to the top of the list and it constantly gets pushed aside. But specifically this question that has to do with security, I don't know what the right answer is. Like, I'm not sure that Israel should, in a perfect world, say, we're gonna put diaspora Jewry at a very high level of the list of policy considerations, because I actually think that maybe there's an adverse effect to that, right? If Israel does take that into consideration, it might be a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. I don't know. It hasn't been tested, so I don't know the answer. But I have this itch, this feeling that it might not be as simple as, well, if Israel only thought about how this is going to impact, then there would be a different pathway. Yeah, I'll move on to the next question. We don't have a lot of time. Sorry, there's a lot more to say about this, like a ton more. Is it, this is the question on how do I account for Jews who are advocating against Israel in Congress? To your question, is it political, anti-Trump, ethical? I would say to you, sir, I think it is all the above, in my humble opinion. I think you eloquently listed basically all the reasons. again, we can have an entire conversation about this, because if you, the broken world we now live in, where you have these toxic echo chambers that are feeding people some poison about their belief system and what it needs to be and how they need to act in accordance, and what are the litmus tests to keep you in check within that belief system, is a big, major global phenomenon and problem. And yet one of the ripples have to do with how that impacts Israel. With regards to, I think you're talking about J Street, elephant in the room, correct? I don't have a great answer here. I think that it is really important that the Jewish community finds a way to not fall apart, to stick together, to maintain close ties, to deal with divisions and problems in an honest and thoughtful way. Given the climate that I just described, that becomes all the more difficult. I also think it's important to also, at certain points, say, these are my lines. This is what I'm willing to deal with this, and this is something I'm simply not willing to deal with and not willing to accept. So I'll give the easiest example for me, because it's I would consider this to be an easy line to draw, and that is anti-Zionism. If somebody says that they don't believe in the right for the Jewish state to exist, I have no starting point there. There's nothing. Right? They're completely wiping me as an individual, but also my entire people off the map. There's no world in which I can accept that. So I hope that semi-answers your question. Gonna move on. Okay, the relations question. Thank you. I think it's an interesting point. If Israel's foe, Iran, a major foe, and the leader of the Shiite axis in the world, but in the region, if it goes back to being something that is a moderate version of itself and is potentially even friends with the state of Israel, and if Hezbollah is no longer a factor, I wish we had these problems. So I like this game. It's a fun one to play. If that were the case, yeah, I think you're probably right in thinking that relations with some of the moderate Sunni countries might not be as strong, because at the end of the day, country relationships have very much to do with interests. There's certainly values, but I would say that's secondary. If the interests align, by and large, you're going to be golden. And you're right in pointing out that the main interests that exist between Israel and these Sunni states is the Iranian spread of evil. And that's impacting them not as much as Israel, but definitely quite a bit. So I relate to your comment and to your interesting practice of what would happen in this beautiful world of yours. Okay, will annexation come back? Possible, and the Band-Aid question. Okay, so with regards to, who asked the annexation question? Oh, that was also you. What's your name? Sorry. Parker. Parker? Okay, so my sense is that it is not gone from the agenda. That the issue of annexation, so for those who will recall, the Abraham Accords were a last-minute spin-off from an Israeli attempt to annex the parts of the West Bank. And it's not off the table because I think that many Israelis feel, especially now after October 7th, that having a state within the borders of the state that would potentially turn into a terror state is not something that you can really conceive of. I would say that many, many Israelis are there. There are more and more voices that are completely fine with annexation. I'll give my personal view, which is that I think it's a bad idea. I would not want that to be the case. But do I think it's going to make its way back onto the Israeli agenda under this government? Meaning another version of this government, I would say yes, you should expect it to make a comeback. Regarding your Band-Aid question, Sean, so just hold on, make sure I got it right. Is it possible to pull it off during conflict, right? Sort of? Okay. I'm not sure. I think that it is definitely more difficult to do that during conflict. There are certain parts to the wound, to the festering wound, that cannot be dismissed, that can't really wait to be dealt with. So one example of the wound that is the thing that we've been speaking about tonight, which is the draft bill. That's like the type of thing that it's so present in your life. It is so in your face that even if you wanted to say, oh, this is, there are so many other things that we're dealing with, we can't handle this issue right now, I don't think you can really push it aside. And not to mention that there is a direct line and connection between the conflict and between that particular wound, right? Like, it is security. That is a security matter, is how many troops you have available to deploy, which we now clearly know that the IDF can use this extra manpower. The question of, like that, it is directly related. Again, the same question that I raised before of why my son and not yours. In this case, it was no longer a practice in some sort of, playing with scenarios into the future. It actually happened, left and right. My first cousin's husband, he was killed in Lebanon, in South Lebanon, 46, he was 47 years old, 8 kids at home. Both a rabbi in the military for his platoon, but also a combat soldier. He volunteered. The man did not have to go, but he knew that if he didn't go, who's going to do it? And so did many, many, many other reservists. And then you have this massive stockpile of individuals that did absolutely nothing and continue to hold on to that as a banner. And be proud of it. And that's, again, like, that's why yes, it's an ethical issue. Yes, it has to do with the core of, it gnaws at the core of who Israel is, what Israel is, and what its values are. All those things are true and they need to be figured out. But it also is directly related to the security situation at hand. And therefore, because those two issues are intertwined. The Band-Aid, meaning the wound, and the conflict, I think that's one issue that sort of cuts through and will make its way to the forefront no matter what.
Next time we change the title from Ethics of War to Ask Yisrael Anything. But that's actually why I love him as a friend and really an educator and a leader in this field of Israel education, of Zionism from afar. He really has a deep understanding, not just of Israel, but of the diaspora, what their relationship looks like, and is able to guide us as leaders in our Jewish community through that deep connection of Zionism and Israel. So thank you for joining us. Next week was supposed to be the released hostage, Neely Margalit. Unfortunately, her travel plans could not happen. So there's going to be an online class with, I believe, Rabbi Kornsgold and, thank you, Rabbi Candace Levy about Passover. So that'll be joining us online, and then we'll continue our Sinai Speaks series. Thank you to Amanda and to Christopher for always helping us stream and record these beautiful series. And we'll grab a picture of our fellowship with Yisrael too.